Religious rites were performed at her Rosebud Place residence before Mrs. Sirimavo Bandaranaike's remains were taken to Parliament. Bhikkhus, including the Venerable Balamiti Ave Kusaladhamma Nayaka Thera, officiated. President Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga, Mrs. Sunetra Bandaranaike, Mr. Anura Bandaranaike and other members of the family participated in the Mataka Vastra Puja. Later, the remains were taken to Parliament. The President, Prime Minister, Opposition Leader, Ministers, MPs and members of the diplomatic corps paid their last respects to former Prime Minister Sirimavo Bandaranaike. The Parliament staff too paid their last respects to the late Prime Minister, who made a revolutionary change in Sri Lanka's political, social and economic sphere. Mrs. Sirimavo Bandaranaike, giving leadership to the SLFP on the death of her illustrious husband SWRD Bandaranaike, was elected Prime Minister in 1960. The government of Mrs. Bandaranaike laid a firm foundation, providing a new path to social progress in Sri Lanka. Mrs. Sirimavo Bandaranaike was elected Prime Minister for the second time in 1970. She gave leadership to national development with a new vision. It was under Mrs. Bandaranaike's government that Sri Lanka became a sovereign republic. The 1972 constitution was drawn up in terms of the mandate received by the United Front government in the 70s. The hosting of the non-aligned summit by Sri Lanka was a milestone in the political career of Mrs. Sirimavo Bandaranaike. She chaired the non-aligned summit held in Colombo. Mrs. Sirimavo Bandaranaike won the respect of the world community, having mediated in settling international issues such as the Kachchatiu issue, the Indian Ocean Peace Zone proposal, and the Indo-China border crisis. She gave leadership to the non-aligned movement and won high acclaim internationally. Mrs. Sirimavo Bandaranaike worked closely with international figures such as Jawaharlal Nehru, Marshal Tito, Abdul Nasser, Prince Sihanouk and Indira Gandhi. Indo-Lanka solidarity was strengthened on account of the personal friendship between Mrs. Sirimavo Bandaranaike and Sri Nehru and Mrs. Indira Gandhi. The effort made by her to make the Indian Ocean a peace zone was an outstanding feature of her foreign policy. Mrs. Sirimavo Bandaranaike mediated to end the border crisis between India and China. The remains of the late Prime Minister were taken to Horagola from Parliament.